The hands that shoved Elowyn over the edge of Thornfall Cliffs belonged to her stepsister. She had time to see Isadora's face, beautiful and twisted with triumph, before the world tilted and there was nothing beneath her feet but empty air and the roar of wind rushing past her ears. Elowyn didn't scream. Perhaps she should have, but the betrayal had stolen her voice along with her footing. 3 heartbeats ago, she had been walking the cliffside path with her stepmother and stepsister, believing they were heading to her father's memorial stone. 3 heartbeats ago, she had been a nobleman's daughter with a modest inheritance and a quiet life ahead of her. Now, she was falling. The granite face of Thornfall blurred past her, gray and black and merciless. Far below, she could see the jagged rocks where the Ashenvale forest met the cliff's base, stones that had earned this place its grim reputation. No one survived Thornfall. That was the point. "Goodbye, little Elowyn," Helene had whispered, just before Isadora's palms connected with her spine. "Your father's fortune will finally go to someone who deserves it." The rocks rushed up to meet her. Elowyn closed her eyes, thinking of her younger brother Ren, alone now with those vipers. Thinking of how she'd failed to protect him. Thinking... Something slammed into her from the side. Not stone, not the killing impact she'd expected. Something warm and impossibly strong that wrapped around her body and changed her trajectory midair. Elowyn's eyes flew open as she found herself cradled against a broad chest, the wind still howling, but the fall somehow controlled. They were still descending, but slowly now, almost gliding through the mist that clung to the lower cliffs. The arms around her tightened, and a voice rumbled against her ear, low and rough, and speaking words she didn't understand. Elowyn twisted to see her rescuer's face and felt her breath abandon her entirely. He was not human, or not entirely. The features were masculine and sharp, beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. High cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from the very cliffs around them, dark hair that whipped in the wind. But his eyes burned molten gold, pupils elongated like a wolf's, fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach drop further than the fall had. "What?" she gasped. "Hold still." The words came in her language now, accented and rough, as if speaking the common tongue required effort. "We land soon." They broke through the mist, and Elowyn saw the forest canopy rushing toward them. She braced for impact, but he twisted at the last moment, taking the brunt of their landing against his own body. They crashed through branches and leaves, his back absorbing blow after blow, until finally they hit the forest floor in an explosion of scattered debris. For a moment there was only silence and the settling of disturbed leaves. Then Elowyn scrambled backward, dead leaves crunching beneath her palms, putting distance between herself and this impossible creature. He lay where he'd landed, chest heaving, and those golden eyes tracking her movement with something that might have been amusement. "You're welcome," he said. "What are you?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was alive. She shouldn't be alive. And this man, this beast, whatever he was, had caught her from a fatal fall as if plucking a leaf from the wind. He sat up slowly, and Elowyn noticed for the first time that he was injured. A wound on his side, just below his ribs, seeped dark blood through what remained of his shirt. The fabric looked like it had been torn by claws, or perhaps teeth. "What am I?" He tilted his head, studying her with those unnatural eyes. "That depends. What do the lowlanders call us now? Monsters? Demons?" A bitter smile crossed his features. "Beastmen of the Ashenvale, perhaps?" Elowyn had heard the stories. Everyone in Valdros had. Tales of creatures that walked as men by day and hunted as wolves beneath the moon. Tales mothers told to frighten children into obedience. "Stay out of Ashenvale Forest, little ones, or the wolf demons will devour you whole." She had always believed them to be myths. "You're injured," she heard herself say, because even terror couldn't completely override years of healer's training. Her mother had taught her before the fever took her. She knew a killing wound when she saw one. "Hunters," he said simply. "Your king's men have grown bold. They ventured deeper into my territory than they ever dared before." He pressed a hand to his side, and Elowen watched his jaw tighten against the pain he refused to show. "I killed 6 before they wounded me, 3 more before I reached the cliffs." He looked up at her, gold eyes dimming slightly, and Elowen realized with a start that they were shifting, the molten color bleeding away to reveal deep winter gray beneath. "I was coming here to die in peace when I saw you fall." "To die?" Elowen's voice cracked. "This wound carries their poison." He lifted his blood-soaked hand, and she could see it now, silver-black veins spreading from the wound's edges, creeping across his skin like frost. "There is no cure. I came to the sacred cliffs to meet death with dignity." That bitter smile again. "Instead, I find a falling woman." He tried to stand and made it halfway before his legs buckled. Elowen moved without thinking, catching him before he could hit the ground. The moment her hands touched his bare skin, something jolted through her. Electric and strange, like lightning trapped beneath his flesh. She gasped, tried to pull back, but his hand closed around her wrist with surprising strength. "You," he breathed, those gray eyes widening. His nostrils flared, and she realized he was scenting her, breathing her in like a predator. "What are you?" "I'm no one," Elowen whispered. "Liar." The word held no malice, only wonder. "I can smell it on you. Power. Hidden. Starving." His thumb traced a circle on her inner wrist, right over her racing pulse. "You're like me. Different from the others." Before Elowen could respond, his eyes rolled back, and his full weight collapsed against her, driving them both to the forest floor. She lay there, pinned beneath a dying wolf demon in the depths of Ashenvale Forest, with her stepmother's betrayal still echoing in her ears and his blood soaking into her dress. Above them, at the top of Thornfall Cliffs, she could hear distant voices shouting. Helene's people, coming to confirm her death. "What do I do?" Elowen whispered to no one. "What do I do now?" Elowen knew she should run. The voices above were growing organized, and soon they would send someone down the treacherous path to verify that her body lay broken on the rocks. When they found no corpse, they would search. And if they found her here, alive, with one of the very creatures their kingdom hunted. She tried to wriggle free from beneath him. His weight was immense, solid muscle and broad shoulders pressing her into the leaf-strewn ground. But as she shifted, his arm tightened around her waist, an unconscious gesture, instinctive, as if even in his death-like state he refused to release what he had caught. "Let go," Elowen hissed. "I need to move. We both need to move." No response. His breath came in shallow rasps against her neck, and she could feel the unnatural heat radiating from his skin. The fever had already begun. She looked toward the cliff face, then deeper into the forest. The Ashenvale stretched endlessly, dark and ancient, a place no lowlander entered willingly. But behind her lay certain death at her stepmother's hands. Ahead lay only probable death in the territories of wolf demons. Not much of a choice, really. With tremendous effort, Elowen managed to roll him onto his back. In the dim light, she got her first true look at him. He was younger than she'd thought, perhaps only a handful of years older than her own 20 winters. His features, relaxed in unconsciousness, revealed an almost vulnerable beauty. Elowen's gaze dropped to his wound and her stomach clenched. The silver-black veins had spread further in just minutes, now reaching past his ribs and creeping toward his heart. Whatever poison the hunters used, it worked fast. "You saved my life," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I can't just leave you here to die." The absurdity of the situation struck her. She was considering dragging a wolf demon deeper into the forest to tend his wounds, a creature from nightmares, a monster her people feared above all others. Helene would laugh herself sick at the irony, but Helene had pushed her off a cliff, so perhaps Eloan's judgment of character needed reassessment. "Can you hear me?" She shook his shoulder gently. "Is there somewhere safe? Somewhere I can take you?" His eyes flickered open. Gray now, purely gray, with no trace of gold. They focused on her face with difficulty. "Den," he rasped. "Northeast. Follow the stream." His hand lifted weakly, pointing toward a gap in the trees where she could hear the distant gurgle of water. "Not far. They won't find us there." "Can you walk?" A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so hollow. "No." Elowen looked at his massive frame, then at her own slender arms. She was not a weak woman. Years of gathering herbs and tending gardens had given her practical strength, but he had to outweigh her by nearly double. "Then I'll drag you," she decided. She positioned herself behind him, hooked her arms beneath his shoulders, and pulled. It was brutal work. For every foot of ground she gained, she had to stop and catch her breath. The stream appeared after what felt like hours. Elowen followed its winding path until she saw a cave mouth hidden behind hanging vines. Getting him inside nearly broke her. By the time she'd pulled him onto the bed of dried furs that lined the cave floor, Elowen was shaking with exhaustion. But they were hidden. For now, they were safe. She collapsed beside him, chest heaving, and stared at the cave ceiling. "I've lost my mind," she announced to the darkness. "I've absolutely lost my mind." The wolf demon didn't respond. His breathing had grown even more ragged, and when Elowen placed her hand against his forehead, the heat nearly burned her palm. The poison was winning. He was dying right in front of her. And despite everything, despite what he was, despite the madness of her situation, Elowen found that she couldn't bear to let that happen. The fever dreams took him hard and fast. Elowen worked through the night, using dried herbs and clean water from the stream. But nothing she did seemed to slow the poison's advance. The silver-black veins had reached his shoulder now, crawling toward his neck. His skin burned so hot that steam rose from the wet cloths she pressed to his brow. "Stay with me," Elowen whispered. "You didn't save me just to die in this cave." His eyes snapped open. Elowen jerked backward, her heart slamming against her ribs, because those eyes weren't gray anymore. They blazed pure, molten gold, bright enough to illuminate the darkness of the cave, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. He moved faster than anything human should be able to move, especially wounded as he was. One moment Elowen was crouched beside him. The next, she was on her back with his weight pressing her into the furs, his hands pinning her wrists above her head. A sound rumbled from his chest, not words, but a growl, deep and primal and utterly inhuman. "Please," Elowen gasped. "Please, I'm trying to help you." He lowered his face to her neck and inhaled deeply. The growl changed pitch, becoming something almost like a purr as he breathed her in. When he spoke, the words were broken, barely intelligible. "Mine," he rasped. "Found you. Finally. Mine. I don't understand." His lips traced up her throat, following the path of her pulse, and Elowen's body responded in ways that horrified her. Heat pooled low in her stomach. Her breath came faster. Every point where his skin touched hers seemed to spark and burn. "Please," she whispered again, though she was no longer certain what she was begging for. He pulled back just far enough to look at her face. Those golden eyes searched hers, and beneath the fever madness, she saw something else. Recognition, longing, a desperate sort of hope that didn't belong in a monster's gaze. "Soul bonded," he breathed. "I thought you were a dream. All those years, dreaming of silver hair and storm-gray eyes. They said I was mad, said there was no one." His hand released her wrist to cup her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle despite the wildness in his expression. "But you're real. You're here. I don't know what you're talking about." Elowin's voice trembled. "The fever is making you see things that aren't." He kissed the corner of her mouth. "Not fever. Fate." Then his lips found the place where her neck curved into her shoulder, and before Elowin could react, his teeth sank deep into her flesh. Pain lanced through her, sharp and shocking, and she cried out. But even as she tried to push him away, the pain began to change. It spread through her veins like liquid fire, burning and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Her back arched off the furs. Her fingers, which had been pushing against his chest, now curled into the remnants of his shirt, pulling him closer. Something was happening inside her, something vast and ancient and inevitable, as if a door long locked had suddenly been thrown open. She felt him, not just his body against hers, but his essence, his very soul brushing against the edges of her consciousness, his joy, his pain, his desperate, overwhelming relief at finally finding her. And beneath it all, a roar of possessive triumph. Mine. When his teeth finally withdrew, Elowin lay trembling beneath him, tears streaming from the corners of her eyes. He licked the wound he'd made, gentle now, almost tender, and she felt it begin to close, far too quickly for any normal injury. "I'm sorry." His voice was a hoarse whisper, the gold in his eyes flickering unsteadily. "I couldn't stop myself. The bond, it demanded." His weight sagged against her as the burst of fever strength abandoned him. "Forgive me. Please, my heart, forgive me." His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed against her chest, unconscious once more. Elowin lay frozen beneath him, one hand pressed to her bleeding neck, the other still tangled in his shirt. Her entire body hummed with foreign sensations, echoes of emotions that weren't her own, whispers of thoughts in that other language, and beneath it all, a profound, terrifying sense of connection. "What did he do to me?" she thought, feeling something dark and wild and ancient stir to life in the depths of her soul. "What have I become?" Elowin woke with his heartbeat in her ears. Not beside her ears. In them. As if his pulse had taken up residence inside her skull, a steady rhythm that she could feel as clearly as her own. She lay still for a long moment, staring at the cave ceiling, trying to convince herself that she was imagining it. Her hand drifted to her neck, where his teeth had broken skin. She expected raw flesh, scabbing wounds, and the sting of an injury less than a day old. Instead, her fingers found smooth skin, slightly raised, faintly warm, but completely healed. Only the faintest ridge of scar tissue marked where the bite had been. "That's impossible," she whispered. But impossible had lost all meaning since yesterday. Elowin sat up slowly, and the movement triggered a wave of awareness that didn't belong to her. Exhaustion that wasn't her own. Pain radiating from a wound she didn't have. A deep, desperate yearning that made her chest ache. She was feeling him. Feeling what he felt. The wolf demon. Her wolf demon, something inside her insisted, lay exactly where he'd collapsed. His massive body curled on its side, his breathing shallow and labored. The silver-black veins had continued their advance during the night. They wrapped around his throat now like dark fingers, reaching for his jaw, creeping toward his temple. He was dying, and somehow, impossibly, she could feel that too. The way his life force flickered and guttered like a candle in a draft. Elowin's chest tightened with an urgency that went beyond compassion. The thought of his death didn't just sadden her. It terrified her, as if his ending would somehow mean her own. "No," she said aloud. "No, I won't let that happen." She knew what she had to do, the same thing she'd sworn never to do again. Not after what had happened with her mother. Not after the village healer had looked at her with such horror and whispered that word. witch. But looking at him now, feeling his life slipping away through this strange bond between them, Elowen found that her old fears meant nothing. She crawled to his side and placed both hands over the wound on his ribs. "Forgive me, Mother," Elowen whispered. Then she closed her eyes and reached for the gift she'd buried deep inside herself. It wasn't healing. Not exactly. What Elowen could do was far stranger. She could see the threads of life itself, silver strands connecting every living thing. And she could strengthen those threads, keep them from fraying when death came to cut them loose. The cost was always the same. Her own life force, flowing out to reinforce another's. She opened her inner sight and gasped. His threads were beautiful. Not the simple silver of ordinary men, but deep gold shot through with amber, thick as rope, and ancient as the forest around them. But the poison had wrapped around them like black thorns, strangling, severing, trying to cut him loose from life itself. And there was something else. A thread that hadn't existed yesterday, a silver strand leading from his chest directly to hers, new and bright and utterly unbreakable. The bond. She could see the bond. Later she would think about what that meant. Now she gathered her strength and poured her own life into his. Light bloomed between her palms, warm and golden. She heard herself cry out as the drain began. Every heartbeat, every breath, feeding the healing she channeled into him. The black thorns recoiled from her light, shriveling and dying, retreating from his golden threads. But it wasn't enough. The poison was too deep, too entrenched. For every tendril she burned away, two more seemed to take its place. More. She needed to give more. Elowen dug deeper, pulling from reserves she didn't know she had. The world began to gray at the edges. She could feel her own heartbeat stuttering, her own threads beginning to fray from the strain. Just a little more. Just a little. Hands closed around her wrists, breaking her concentration. Her eyes flew open to find him staring at her, fully conscious, his gaze clear winter gray and filled with absolute horror. "Stop," he commanded, his voice stronger than it had any right to be. "You're killing yourself." "I'm saving you," Elowen gasped. "By dying?" He pulled her hands away from his wound, and she saw with distant amazement that the silver-black veins had retreated significantly, no longer reaching past his ribs. "I won't allow it. Whatever you are, soul-bonded, I won't buy my life with yours." Elowen swayed, the world spinning around her. She would have fallen if he hadn't caught her, gathering her against his chest despite his own weakness. For a long moment they simply breathed together, two broken creatures clinging to each other in a cave at the edge of the world. "You're a spirit weaver," he murmured against her hair. "I thought your kind were only legends." "I don't know what that means." Her voice came out thin and exhausted. "I only know that I'm cursed, that everyone I try to save. Not cursed. Blessed." His arms tightened around her. "And you saved me. Against all reason, against all odds, you saved me." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, and something shifted in his expression. Wonder, gratitude, and beneath it all, a fierce protective tenderness. "I am Theron. I am—" He hesitated, as if the next words cost him something. "I am Alpha of the Ashenvale Pax, and I am forever in your debt." "Elowen," she whispered. "My name is Elowen. Elowen." He spoke her name like a prayer, and when he smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, warm and slightly wondering, something fluttered in her chest that had nothing to do with the bond. "Elowen," he said again, softer this time. "I've been dreaming of you for 10 years, and now you're here." She should ask what that meant. She should demand explanations, should pull away, should remember that he was a monster and she was his prey. Instead, she found herself leaning into his warmth, her exhaustion overwhelming every rational thought. What have I done? She murmured, the question meant for herself. But Theron heard, and his answer rumbled through his chest and into hers. You've found your way home. They stayed in the cave for 3 days. Theron healed with impossible speed. By the second day, he could stand. By the third, he moved through the forest with fluid grace, hunting game and bringing it back to the cave. They spoke little. The bond between them hummed with constant awareness, a silent conversation that required no translation. On the third evening, Theron returned with urgency in his stride. Men coming, he said, crouching beside her at the fire. Many men, horses, weapons. Elowyn's blood went cold. Hunters? No. His gray eyes met hers and she felt his concern pulse through the bond. They wear the crest of your lowland lords. They search for something. He paused. For someone. For her. Helene must have sent men to confirm her death, and when they found no body on the rocks. I have to go back. The words left her mouth before she could think them through. My brother, Ren. He's only 12. If Helene realizes I survived, she'll know he could inherit if something happens to me. She'll... Theron's hand closed around her wrist. You go back. You die. If I stay here, he dies. Elowyn pulled free of his grip, already gathering the few supplies she'd accumulated. You don't understand. I'm all he has. Our father trusted me to protect him, and I've already failed once by letting Helene get close enough to... Then I come with you. Elowyn froze. What? Theron rose to his full height, and in the firelight, he looked every inch the predator, powerful, dangerous, and utterly certain. You saved my life. I protect yours now. This is the way. You can't. Elowyn shook her head. If anyone sees you, if they realize what you are, the kingdom has been hunting your kind for years. There's a bounty on wolf demon heads. They'll kill you. Something flickered across his face. Not fear, but a grim sort of recognition. I know very well what your people do to mine. He stepped closer, and his hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. But you are soul-bonded, my mate. I cannot let you walk into danger alone. The word mate sent a shiver through her that she couldn't quite name. Then come with me to the edge of the forest, she compromised. But no further. Please, Theron. I couldn't bear it if you died because of me. For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture that felt achingly intimate despite its simplicity. I will wait, he murmured, but not forever. If you do not return by moonrise, I come for you. They traveled through the night, Theron leading her along paths invisible to her lowlander eyes. At the forest's edge, where ancient trees gave way to cultivated fields, they stopped. This is as far as I go, Theron said. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that burned like a brand. Come back to me, Elowyn. Whatever happens, come back. I will, she whispered. He pulled something from around his neck, a leather cord bearing a single wolf's tooth, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. He pressed it into her palm. If you need me, he said, hold this and call. I will hear. I will come. Then he stepped back into the shadows of Ashenvale, and the darkness swallowed him whole. Elowyn stood at the boundary between two worlds, his tooth clutched against her heart, and tried to convince herself that she wasn't making a terrible mistake. The manor house loomed ahead in the pre-dawn darkness. Home, once. Prison. Now. She would save Ren. She would escape Helene's clutches. And then she would find her way back to the wolf who waited in the forest, the mate she hadn't known she was searching for. If she survived the night. 3 weeks later, Elowyn had made it back to the manor that night, slipping through the servants' entrance, hoping to reach Ren before dawn. But Helene's spies had been waiting. Within hours, she found herself locked in her old chamber. a prisoner in her own home. Now the dreams came every night. She would close her eyes and find herself running through endless forests, 4 legs instead of 2, silver fur rippling in moonlight, and always another wolf beside her, golden-eyed and fierce. The bond was hungry. Food tasted like ash. Sleep brought no rest, and her body had begun to change in ways that frightened her. Her senses had sharpened. She could hear the guards' conversations from 3 rooms away. She could smell the poison Helene tried to slip into her evening tea. Something was happening to her. Something that had begun with Theron's bite. But she couldn't think about that now. Not when Ren was still in danger. Helene had kept them separated since Eloan's return. For your own protection, she'd claimed, with that serpent smile. But Eloan had learned to read the servant's whispers, and she knew the truth. Her stepmother was preparing something. Something that required both heirs to House Valdros to be conveniently eliminated. Tonight, she would finally reach her brother. Tonight, they would escape together. The lock on her chamber door yielded to the wire she'd stolen from a serving tray. Eloan slipped into the darkened corridor, her bare feet silent on the cold stone, her newly sharpened senses alert for any threat. Ren's room was in the east wing. She made it halfway there before a hand closed around her arm and yanked her into an alcove. Going somewhere, stepdaughter? Helene's face materialized from the shadows. Behind her stood Lord Carriage, the king's master of hunters. We had such hopes that the fall had killed you, Helene continued. But this is actually better. Lord Carriage circled Eloan like a predator. You're certain she's the one? She spent 3 days in wolf demon territory and emerged alive. Carriage gripped her chin, forcing her head to the side. His fingers found the scar on her neck. A claiming mark. His eyes gleamed. The king's alchemists have developed a poison to eradicate the wolf demon plague, but we needed a way to deliver it to their alpha. It seems fate has provided one. I'll never help you, Eloan spat. Oh, you won't have a choice. Helene's laugh was like breaking glass. The bond works both ways, doesn't it? Wherever you go, he'll follow. We simply have to make you the bait. They dragged her to the manor's stone cellar, chaining her to the wall like a common criminal. Eloan fought, screamed, called for Ren, but no help came. She was still struggling against her chains when Helene leaned close, her breath warm against Eloan's ear. Your brother is already dead, by the way. Tragic accident. Fell down the stairs this very evening. She patted Eloan's cheek with mock sympathy. You're the last of House Valdros now. Well, for a few more hours at least. The words hit Eloan like a physical blow. Ren, her sweet, gentle Ren, who loved birds and drew pictures of dragons and had trusted her to keep him safe. Gone. Something inside Eloan cracked open. Grief and rage and desperate, howling loss poured through the breach, and with it came power, wild and uncontrolled, surging through her veins like fire. Her vision shifted. The dark cellar blazed with silver threads, lifelines connecting everything around her. And there, beneath her skin, she felt something new awakening. Something that had been growing since the night Theron marked her. Something with fur and fangs and an overwhelming need to hunt. The wolf's tooth against her chest burned like a brand. Theron, she thought, pouring all her anguish into the bond between them. Theron, please. The response came instantly. A roar of fury and possessive terror that wasn't her own, flooding through their connection like a tidal wave. Coming, she felt, rather than heard. Hold on. The manor house exploded into chaos. Eloan heard the screams first, guards shouting, weapons clashing, and beneath it all, the howls. Dozens of them, rising into the night like a war cry. The cellar door burst inward, torn from its hinges by massive clawed hands. A wolf stood in the doorway. silver-gray fur, golden eyes blazing with protective rage, larger than any natural beast. He, padded toward her, and even in this form, even through the terror and grief, Elowyn knew him. Theron. His body began to shift, bones cracking and fur receding, until the man crouched before her, naked and terrible and beautiful in his fury. "I have you," he growled, snapping her chains like paper. "I have you, my heart. You're safe." But Elowyn could barely hear him over the rushing in her ears, the burning in her blood, the thing inside her clawing to get free. She looked down at her hands and saw them beginning to change, fingers lengthening, nails darkening into claws. "Theron," she gasped. "Something's wrong, something's—" The transformation hit her like lightning, and the world dissolved into pain and silver light. Elowyn opened her eyes to a ceiling of carved stone. For a long moment she simply lay there, trying to piece together fragmented memories. The cellar. Helene's cruelty. Ren. Grief slammed into her, fresh and devastating, and she curled in on herself with a sob. "Easy." A woman's voice, gentle and accented. "Easy, child. You're safe now." Elowyn forced herself to look around. She lay in a bed draped with furs and woven blankets, in a chamber lit by braziers that cast dancing shadows on walls carved with wolf motifs. An elderly woman sat beside her, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, watching her with careful concern. "Where am I?" Elowyn's voice came out as a croak. "Fenhollow Keep, the seat of the Ashenvale Pax." The woman pressed a cup of water into her hands. "I am Morvenna, the Pack's spirit keeper. You've been unconscious for 4 days." 4 days. Elowyn's hand flew to her chest, searching for the wolf's tooth. But it was gone, replaced by a leather cord bearing a different pendant. A silver crescent moon. "The Alpha's token," Morvenna said quietly. "He hasn't left your side since he carried you through the gates. Not for food, not for counsel, not for anything." She paused. It took 3 of his betas to convince him to rest even briefly. "Theron." Elowyn struggled to sit up. "Where is he? Is he—" "He is well. Worried beyond reason, but well." Morvenna's expression grew complicated. "Though Theron is perhaps not the name you should be using for him. At least, not in public." Elowyn stared at her. "What do you mean? Did he not tell you?" Morvenna sighed. "Of course he didn't. The fool boy was probably too busy trying to die nobly in the forest." She met Elowyn's eyes. "The wolf who saved you, the one you healed with your spirit weaving, is Theron Ashvale, Alpha King of all the Ashenvale Packs, ruler of every wolf demon in the Northern Territories." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. The wounded creature she'd dragged through the forest, the fever-mad wolf who had bitten her in the firelight. A king? "That's impossible," Elowyn whispered. "Is it?" Morvenna's lips quirked. "You bound yourself to him, child, soul-bonded to the most powerful wolf in 3 centuries. Did you truly not notice anything unusual about him?" Before Elowyn could respond, the chamber door opened. Theron stood in the doorway, and for the first time, Elowyn saw him clearly, not as the dying stranger in the forest, not as the fever-mad creature in the cave, but as he truly was. He wore clothes now, dark leather and silver clasps, and a circlet of twisted metal rested on his brow. His bearing held the weight of command, the unmistakable presence of someone born to lead. But his eyes, those winter-gray eyes, held nothing but naked vulnerability as they found hers. "You're awake," he breathed. Morvenna slipped from the room without a word, and then they were alone. Theron approached the bed slowly, as if she might shatter if he moved too quickly. When he reached her side, he sank to his knees, the Alpha King, kneeling at her bedside like a supplicant. "I am sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "for everything. For the bite, for the bond, for what my claiming has done to you. He bowed his head, pressing his forehead to the edge of the mattress. You saved my life, and in return, I have destroyed yours. Destroyed? Elowen reached out, her fingers brushing through his dark hair before she could stop herself. Theron, I don't understand. The change. He looked up, and she saw tears tracking down his cheeks. My bite has triggered it. Your body is trying to become like mine, but you were not born to the wolf blood. Most humans who are bitten. He swallowed hard. Most humans die. The words hung in the air between them. There is a ritual, he continued, barely audible. Ancient magic that might help you survive the transformation. But it must be performed on the blood moon, which rises in 3 days. And even then, the chances... His voice broke. I have killed you, Elowen. By saving your life, I have killed you. Elowen stared at him. This powerful king, reduced to tears at her bedside, begging forgiveness for a crime committed in delirium. She thought of the bond between them, the way his emotions echoed in her chest. She thought of the dreams, running beside him through endless forests. She thought of Ren, gone forever because she hadn't been strong enough to save him. Then I'll die fighting, she said quietly. Because I refuse to let my last act be surrender. Theron's head snapped up, hope and anguish warring in his expression. The ritual, Elowen continued. Tell me what I have to do. The blood moon rose over Fenhollow Keep like a wound in the sky. Elowen stood at the center of the ancient stone circle, surrounded by wolves in both human and beast form. Torches flickered in iron brackets, casting dancing shadows across the sacred ground where generations of Ashenvale wolves had come to mark their most important rituals. Tonight, she would either become one of them or die trying. Theron stood outside the circle, forbidden by ancient law from interfering once the ritual began. His gray eyes never left her face, and through their bond, she could feel his terror like a physical weight. He had argued for hours against this, begged her to let him find another way. But there was no other way. Morvenna had made that clear. The change is already upon you, the Spirit Keeper had explained. Your body fights between what it was and what it's becoming. Without the ritual, the conflict will tear you apart within days. So here Elowen stood, barefoot on cold stone, wearing nothing but a thin white shift, waiting for magic she didn't understand to either save her or kill her. Morvenna began to chant, her voice rising and falling in the old wolf tongue. The other wolves joined in, their harmonies weaving together into something that vibrated in Elowen's very bones. Power gathered in the air, thick and electric, pressing against her skin. Then the pain began. It started in her chest, where the bond anchored itself to her heart. Fire spread outward through her veins, and Elowen gasped as her legs buckled. She caught herself on hands and knees, panting, watching her fingers begin to lengthen and twist. Let go, Morvenna's voice echoed in her mind. Stop fighting, let the wolf in. But that was the problem. Every instinct Elowen had screamed at her to fight, to resist, to hold on to her humanity with everything she had. Her spirit-weaving gift surged up in response to the invasion, trying to heal the very transformation that might save her. She's rejecting it, someone shouted. The change won't take... More pain, worse than anything she'd ever known. Elowen screamed as her bones cracked and reformed wrong, caught between two shapes, belonging to neither. Through the haze of agony, she felt Theron's desperation battering against the boundaries of the ritual circle. Let me in, his voice roared through their bond. Elowen, let me help you. But the ancient laws held. He couldn't cross the circle. He couldn't reach her. And she was dying. Her spirit-weaving sight flickered on involuntarily, and she saw her own life threads fraying, snapping, unraveling strand by strand. The golden thread that connected her to Theron blazed bright. So bright, but even it was beginning to dim as her life force bled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or only in her mind. "I'm sorry. I tried." Darkness swallowed her whole. Theron felt the moment her heart stopped. The bond between them, that golden thread he had cherished since the moment he'd first touched her, went suddenly, horribly silent. Where her presence had lived in his chest, there was only emptiness, only cold. "No." The word tore from his throat. "No, no, no." He lunged across the circle's boundary, ancient laws be damned, gathering her limp body into his arms. Her skin was gray, her eyes were closed, her chest didn't rise. "Elowen." He shook her gently at first, then harder. "Elowen, come back. Come back to me, please. You can't, I can't." His betas tried to pull him away. He snarled at them with feral fury, clutching her closer, as if he could pour his own life into her through sheer desperate will. "My king." Morvena's voice was heavy with grief. "My king, she's gone. The ritual failed. There's nothing more." "Then I follow her." The words silenced every wolf in the circle. Theron looked up at his gathered pack, at the people he had led and protected for 15 years, and felt nothing but hollow emptiness. Ancient law states that an alpha who loses his soul-bonded mate may choose to follow. His voice was eerily calm now, the eye of a hurricane of grief. "I make that choice. At dawn, I will go to the grove of first wolves. The execution will be traditional." "Theron, you cannot!" One of his betas began. "I am your king." He pressed his lips to Elowen's cold forehead. "And I am already dead." My heart stopped when hers did. He carried her body to his chambers and laid her on his bed, arranging her silver hair across the pillows, folding her hands over her still chest. He stayed beside her through the dark hours, murmuring words of love and apology, telling her about the life they should have had together. At dawn, he walked to meet his death. Elowen woke to silence. Not the silence of death. She had touched that darkness and found it wanting. This was different. This was the silence of a vast ancient forest, of moonlight on snow, of something wild and patient waiting to be born. She opened her eyes and saw not the stone ceiling of Fenhollow Keep, but an endless expanse of stars. "Finally," a voice said. "We wondered when you would stop fighting." Elowen sat up, or tried to. Her body felt strange, remade, operating on instincts she didn't recognize. When she looked down at herself, she saw silver-white fur instead of skin, 4 paws instead of hands. "There you are," the voice continued, and Elowen realized it wasn't external. It came from inside her, from a presence that had been trying to emerge since the night Theron marked her. "We are one now. Wolf and woman. Spirit weaver and beast. We are complete." The bond roared back to life in her chest, but wrong. Muted. Distant. And through it, she felt something that made her new wolf heart clench with terror. Theron. Grief-mad. Walking toward death. "He thinks we died," her wolf realized. "He goes to the grove, to follow us into the dark." No. Elowen's human consciousness surged up, merging with her wolf's instincts into something stronger than either alone. She was on her feet, all 4 of them, before the thought fully formed, racing through corridors that blurred past her supernatural speed. Servants screamed as a massive silver-white wolf tore through the keep. Guards leaped aside, but Elowen didn't slow, didn't hesitate, her mate's fading presence pulling her forward like a beacon. The grove of first wolves lay half a league from the keep, accessible only by a path through ancient trees. Elowen covered the distance in minutes, her new body singing with power she'd never imagined. She burst into the sacred clearing just as an elder raised a ceremonial blade over Theron's bowed head. "Stop!" The command tore from her throat in both human speech and wolf howl, layered and resonant with power. Every wolf in the grove froze, including Theron, who looked up with an expression of utter disbelief. Elowen? His voice cracked on her name. She shifted without thinking, the transformation as natural as breathing now, and stood before him in human form, naked, silver-haired, and blazingly alive. "You absolute fool," she said, and her voice shook with tears and fury and overwhelming love. "Did you really think I would let you die alone?" Theron was on his feet, crossing the distance between them in 3 desperate strides. His hands cupped her face, trembling, as if he couldn't believe she was real. "You were dead," he whispered. "I felt you go. The bond almost killed me," Elowen agreed. "But something pulled me back. Someone." She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling its racing beat, feeling their connection blaze back to full strength. "You did, Theron. Your love gave me something to fight for." "My heart," he breathed. "My soul. My everything." "Yours," she agreed. "But only if you're also mine." She saw the understanding dawn in his eyes. A claiming worked both ways. He had marked her in the cave, in fever and desperation, but she had never marked him. Until now. Elowen rose on her toes, wound her fingers through his dark hair, and pulled his head down to expose the curve of his throat. She felt his whole body shudder as her lips found his pulse point. "Mine," she growled against his skin, the word vibrating with new power. Then she bit down. Theron's roar echoed through the grove as her teeth broke his skin, but his arms only crushed her closer. Through their bond, she felt his ecstasy crash into her own, 2 souls recognizing each other, claiming each other, becoming something greater than either alone. "Mine," his wolf howled through their connection. "Yours," hers answered. "Forever." When she finally released him, they were both crying and laughing and holding each other so tightly that breath became optional. "The bond is complete," Morvenna announced to the gathered pack, her old voice rich with wonder. "The Alpha Queen has risen." The wolves around them began to howl, a song of celebration that rose toward the brightening sky. But Elowen barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her mate, her king, her home. "I love you," Theron murmured against her lips. "I have loved you since before I knew your name, since I first dreamed of silver hair and storm-gray eyes." "I love you too," Elowen whispered back. "Though you might have mentioned you were a king before I dragged you through a forest." His laugh was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. Later, there would be challenges to face. Helene and Lord Caelric still threatened from the lowlands. The king's hunters still sought to exterminate Theron's people. And Elowen had a brother to mourn and a vengeance to plan. But that was later. For now, in the sacred grove where she'd stopped her mate from following her into death, Elowen simply held on to the miracle she'd found, a love that had caught her when she fell, that had bitten her and bonded her and refused to let her go. She had been pushed off a cliff to die. Instead, she had learned to fly.